I appreciate your time here. And this is a very interesting one, a very complicated one, because a lot of people are pointing to the First Amendment, talking about free speech. What legal standing is taking place there? This is a private company, ABC and Disney. What do you make of it?
Yeah, so people need to understand a couple of things. First of all, freedom of speech protects virtually all speech, except for a few exceptions. You can't defame somebody and assert falsehoods that injure somebody's reputation. You can't assert or disclose private facts or confidential information. And you can't say statements that incite violence and things like that. But other than that, we are free to speak whatever we want to speak. And certainly in this instance, it's also hitting two of the most coveted protections of the First Amendment: statements against the government or about the government, asserted by shows and hosts which are entertainers, comedians, saying jokes, parody. So these two areas really hit the major significant facets of the First Amendment, which is why this is a little bit concerning.
Yeah, and we heard during that story talking about the FCC and some of these pressure points, saying they can do it the easy way or the hard way. With the FCC's involvement, there are plenty of different factors with different mergers going on right now. How much of a legal complication is that to have the FCC say this one day and this event happen the next?
It's a big problem, because what you have is you have, the force of the government who's in a position to approve certain mergers and affect business, conflating with personal impressions and personal opinions of the administration. The administration does not like Jimmy Kimmel, doesn't like Steve Colbert, and as a result, it seems to be implicitly using the force of the bureaucracy and the coercion of the government to shut down, these people that it doesn't like. And it's a huge problem, and it needs to be addressed, because you can't use the government to shut down speech that is otherwise allowable, lawful, and to which everybody's entitled to hear, whether or not they like it.
Yeah, no, that is a very good point. And as we also noted, that Jimmy Kimmel not necessarily canceled, just out indefinitely for the time being. Is there any recourse for this late night comic that people are so familiar with? Is this the last we see of Jimmy Kimmel on ABC?
No, not necessarily. I mean, there's not really much that Jimmy Kimmel himself can do. He's an employee, he's been engaged by the network, he's talent. And so whether or not the shows, air are subject to the network. And since he hasn't been terminated or the show's been canceled, there's really no wrongful termination or labor claims at this point. So it's really sitting in the hands of Disney. And Disney has a couple of choices. Either do what they did, which is kind of bend the knee and suspend the show, or to resist that and air the show however they wish and wait for the FCC to act. If the FCC does act to try to take away their license or otherwise infect some sanction, then they go to court and they put the First Amendment in front of the judges and the court system, which they may need to do, because in this case, the benefit of that is if you challenge any type of negative action by the FCC and you're successful, that's going to give you precedence for what may happen in the future. And I think this is foreshadowing of what's to come. This is not going to end with Jimmy Kimmel. There's going to be further attacks on the media, further attacks on shows. And so what needs to happen is the media needs to push back. We need some legal precedents so that, a big stoppage can be put in place and hopefully kind of cease this type of activity.
And that's kind of where you're leading me to next. I wanted to put this up from Brendan Carr, the FCC, the person that has been really talking about this, the top federal authority on this, saying broadcast TV stations have always been required by their licenses to operate in the public interest. And I think operate in the public interest, if it does go to court, is going to be a kind of term or a grouping of words that we're going to look into quite a bit that serves the local communities. Broadcasters have long retained the right to not air national programs they believe are inconsistent with public interest, including their local communities' values. Tre, I want to ask you about this in terms of the FCC license. Is there any precedence prior to someone getting that stripped away from them, and how big of a deal is it?
I'm not aware of any precedence that involves taking away a license based on allowable content that is disfavored by one party or another, or one administration or another. I mean, the purpose of the FCC is to protect against unlawful speech that is gained to hurt people, involve minors, things that might be violative of the airways, but allowing political content or commentary, parody, jokes, entertainment that may even be distasteful. Whether or not it's distasteful is irrelevant, in terms of protecting interests. Some people want to listen to Jimmy Kimmel. Some people like what he has to say. Why should you deprive those people of their entertainment because another group may not like that? When people can just change the channel. So we need to be very concerned and very wary and very scrutinizing of the grounds in any effort to try to revoke a license, because there's very specific reasons why you can do it, and you're battling against the First Amendment.
And I do want to dispel some kind of rumors, because we talk about this, some of the aspects of it. This isn't a news program. This is obviously a very much a comedy kind of hour, and also it airs late at night, so it's not necessarily on at prime time. And we know how kind of the different times also have different implications for the FCC. Can you speak to that at all, just the difference between news and comedy and also the hour in which it airs?
Absolutely. So this is not a news organization, a news show whose job is to provide facts, to inform the public, where we expect veracity, accuracy, and to be a proper disclosure of what's happening. This is an entertainment show that involves comedians, that involves commentary and parody, which is anything but factual. As a matter of fact, they make fun of the facts, they distort the facts for comedy. That in some instances, that's how we find things to be extremely comedic. So you are taking a show that's virtually polarly opposite of what we would expect from a fact-finding, accurate news organization whose job is to provide comedic content, and to attack that it implies that it's not really the merits of the speech. It's more of a personal opinion and a personal dislike for that speech.
Yeah, that is a very good point. And of course, Democrats saying this is an attack on that free speech. Tre Lovell, thank you so much for breaking it all down. I appreciate it. We potentially could soon see this in the courts. Thanks again for your time, your insight here on Live Now.
Thanks for having me.